You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and that charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, buy some bottles, impress them girls. It's more than life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And I'm Ethan. And they did it. They finally did it. It took all season, but they did it. They finally did it. And, well, Dennis Allen, he finally did it as well. And what am I talking about? Well, only two is what I'm talking about. 2 games. They finally won 2 games in a row. And talk about the game to do it in. -9 degrees. This real Phil thing they're talking about. So real Phil felt like -15, and with 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts, a little bit of snow. I didn't really notice a lot of snow. There was maybe a little bit already on the ground, but there really wasn't a lot coming down during the game. But wow, for them to finally get their second game of the season, this was the last one I was really expecting. But I picked them to win, and well, they came through for us. And like I said, I'm invested in these games, and they're keeping it going, and they're keeping it going to where coming down to the wire, even coming into week 17 now, we still got meaningful games. So this season it isn't just a throwaway, and it's not just been some people feel as if it's been a throwaway game season since probably back all the way probably back since I don't know, week 13 or something, probably since like losses against like the Cincinnati Bengals, probably far enough back since then. People probably have been giving up on this team since the Saints lost to Carolina in what was that, week 3 or something, when the Saints probably starting Andy Dalton. But hey, we're still going. We're still in the hunt, as they say. But let's break down some of this play-by-play and how this game kind of played out here. But and go kind of by the quarters and by the numbers and by the stats, and maybe talk about the makeup of the NFC South and how that Buccaneers Cardinals game kind of played out, and how every time the Saints need a little bit of help for a team to knock off the Buccaneers, seems like every single time, seems like 4 weeks in a row now, a team has had a double-digit lead against the Buccaneers, and seems like team always seems to blow it in the fourth quarter. Seems like it's been the Rams, the Saints, the Cardinals. Seems like there was another team somewhere in there, and they always seem to blow it. Man, that Tom Brady, he must have a bunch of comeback wins and fourth quarter wins this year. Someone needs to fact check that on PFR or PFF, because he seems like he has one of those every week now. But anyways, can I get a menu? And this game, we've had a couple games now that haven't started out as punt fest, or at least the Saints do a pretty consistent job of getting their 3 and out, the defense, at least on their defensive possession. But the Saints have done a pretty good job the last couple weeks of maybe starting out with a punt of their own, or getting a defensive stop of their own, and then doing a pretty quick turnaround and getting a score, and that's what they did last week with getting 2 touchdowns right off the bat. But this game here was definitely a punt fest, pretty much all the way through the first quarter. But I think it was on the Saints' second offensive possession. They did go on a pretty long drive there. They did go on like a 10-play drive, and marched. They marched down all the way to the Cleveland's 42-yard line, and but it got messy towards the end of that drive. It was a 2nd and 8, and Andy Dalton had an intentional grounding where he had, I think it was Marquez Callaway and Traquan, Traquan Smith both ran like a wrong route and got him. It's just really a bad call where he got an intentional grounding just because his receivers ran a wrong route. Like the ref shouldn't have thrown a flag there because of a miscue by his receivers. Like that's not what his intent was. It wasn't because he was throwing away because of the pressure. He actually thought one of his receivers was going to be in that zone, but because he's playing with these backup receivers because Jarvis Landry went on IR, and because Chris Olave wasn't there, the only decent receiver he had for the day, wide receiver that is, was Rashid Shaheed. That's really the only starting quality wide receiver he had out there for the day, and then Juwan Johnson, who's actually a tight end. Those are the only two worthwhile receivers he had on the day. And then on the next play, it's 3rd and 8, and he just has a little dump off to Alvin Kamara for 5 yards. I think that was it was a little like shovel pass forward, and that was just a hectic play. And of course, it comes up with both Alvin Kamara and Andres Pete came up gimpy on the play, and that was just like a culmination of like the Saints season, like in a microcosm. You throw this like dead play that's like a shovel pass forward. You're not going to get 18 yards off of that. And it's like, if you're just going to do something like that, you might as well just run it instead of having this play that's just a discombobulated play that's going to end up getting 2 of your players hurt and get Andreas Pete hurt in the process. And he goes out and is doubtful to return with an ankle injury. And then before you know it, you're down both of your guards, Cesar Ruiz, who was already out for the season with a foot injury, and then you lose your other guard, Andreas Pete, for the rest of the game. And they were decent running the ball okay up until that point. And after Andres Pete goes down, you have the thought that you're not going to be able to run the ball or protect in the pass game at all after that happens, even though you don't really feel as if you want to throw the ball in those conditions. And so even though it was a 10-play drive, you only got a little ways into Cleveland's territory at the 42. So they end up having to punt after that horrible series of a intentional grounding and getting Andreas Pete and Alvin Kamara hurt on the same play. But luckily, Alvin Kamara was able to come back into the game after that horrible series of events. And then the Saints end up punting, and the defense is still holding strong for the Saints. They force another 3-and-out, and then the Saints get the ball back, and this is when things start kind of going bad for the Saints here. And this is something they were doing a lot in this game. Trevor Penning, that was one of my hot takes. I was hoping that Trevor Penning would get the start at one of the guard positions, which he didn't. I'm getting a little ahead of myself with talking about my hot takes, but Trevor Penning reported quite a bit as the 6th offensive lineman. They used him a lot in this game as reporting as an eligible and 6th offensive lineman. So I won't say what I want to say here, but he was used a lot in that spot. But I'll just talk about the three plays here that led up to the walls started kind of closing in on New Orleans a little bit early in this game. But Trevor Penning reported eligible, and they did a direct snap to Alvin Kamara, and it went for no gain. And then on 2nd and 10, they Andy Dalton, it went for -5 yards because it was a fumble, and he luckily recovered it, and they passed for 5 yards to Alvin Kamara, and it went for I don't know why it says -5 yards when he recovered it. It was just incomplete. I don't know why it says any weird reading that off. I don't know why it says -5 yards when it ended up just being an incomplete pass. So it ended up he recovered it, and then it went what ended up just being an incomplete pass, and then it's on 3rd and 10. Andy Dalton throws a pass, and which I've seen a lot of people talk about this pass, saying that it was like a great pass that he threw to Juwan Johnson, but it really wasn't a great pass. People said like, "Oh, it was a great pass," and Juwan Johnson should have caught it, but it really wasn't as great a pass as people like try to make it out to be. Because a lot of people, I don't know, they try to act as if Andy Dalton has been like great and amazing over these last couple games and stuff, and up until that interception he hadn't thrown one in a while. But I mean, in these conditions and stuff, like it's not like that it was amazing pass or anything, because I mean, Juwan Johnson had to like dive for that catch, so Juwan Johnson, it was like a short middle pass, like over the middle, and Juwan Johnson had to like dive sideways over the middle for it, and it did hit him in the hands. So it hit him in the hands and got tipped up in the air. And LSU first round pick product, Grant Delpit, intercepted it and returned it for 40 yards. So I mean, it's not like it was a easy catch or anything for Juwan Johnson. So to say it was like a amazing throw or like an easy pass for Juwan Johnson, but I get the whole thing about if it hits your hands, you should catch it. But I mean, in these kind of conditions, when you're throwing a ball in -degree weather, it's cold, it's icy out there. I mean, the ball probably it feels is like as hard as a rock, and then making it any harder than it needs to be on a catch like that, you're having to dive for it. To say that it was like a great throw or anything is a little, can't really agree with that anymore. So then they get the ball in great field position after the 40-yard return by LSU product Grant Delpit, who was probably one of Cleveland Browns' best players, definitely their best secondary player, probably right there with Denzel Ward, the corner. So that they get great set up with great field position, and they end up, I think it ends up going that they move the ball all the way into down to like the Saints 12, and then the quarter ends, and right after the quarter ends, it's 3rd and 3 at the Saints 12, and we all know what happens next. Deshaun Watson, this was like a run, like all the way. This was just like, this is what you see with like Taysom Hill's QB power, QB sweeps, and he just like not even touched. This was like too easy for Deshaun Watson, and he just runs in for a touchdown. And like even me at this moment, I was like, ball game, and I was looking on Twitter, social media. There was Saints media people and other Facebook people, Twitter people, social media people. I think everyone had the same mindset and opinion about that. Like 7 points in that game, and they were talking about the weather real feel, but the real feel for this game after Cleveland scored that 7 points, it felt like 7 points in that game felt like 100 points. The deficit just even after that, and the way it happened, like an interception, like a turnover, felt like the only way that you could move the ball and get points in this game up until that point. And then, of course, right after that happens, the Saints get the ball back, and what do? They go 3-and-out. So that just magnifies what just happened. And then the Cleveland Browns get the ball and go on a 17 play drive, and just end up adding even more points. They had another field goal, and that just definitely, if it didn't feel like it was a ball game at that point, it definitely did then when it was 7-0. When it was 10-0, it felt like 100 points. It felt like 500 points at that point. And then this seems one of the few things the Saints have been good at this season is the 2-minute drill. That's one thing that's been kind of a saving grace for the Saints, or maybe one of the things that has made them like worth watching, is that, okay, they got the ball back. I'm trying to think how much time they had. 4 minutes. So this is either what you want to call the 2-minute drive or their 4-minute offense. Their 2-minute drive or their 4-minute offense, at least in the first half, is good. I wouldn't say it's great at the end of games because they haven't been good at closing out games, but when they need to do it at the end of games to at least get a field goal, they've actually been pretty decent. And I think that's kind of what saved them in this game, because they were able to get down the field and end up getting at least 3 points in this game. And that was big in this game. Any points in this type of game was big. And Will Lutz being able to just even make just a 23-yard field goal in these type of conditions, because kicking a field goal and kicking a football in these conditions is probably like kicking a boulder, kicking a bowling ball. So they went into halftime 10-3 Cleveland lead, and so the Saints got the football to start the second half, and they did what probably no one really expected with how the first half went. Is they actually marched down the field and ended up getting a touchdown, which they ran the ball really well, and connected with Rashid Shaheed a couple times. One of them was a nice 14-yard gain, and capped it off with really some tough running by Taysom Hill, and was capped off by a 6-yard run by Taysom Hill, where he carried probably a good number of Cleveland Brown defenders into the end zone with him on a 6-yard run, a tough 6-yard run by Taysom Hill, and that ended up tying the game 10-10. And before you know it, it's 0-0. It's a tie game, and I never expected the Saints to be able to tie the game, especially that early on in the second quarter. That's just something I never expected them to capitalize on. The old double dip, getting points at the end of the half and then getting points to start the second half, and then you just have a little punt fest there. The Cleveland Browns got the ball back. They ended up just having a 5-play drive, nothing, and then Saints then end up just going 3-and-out, and then the Saints ended up having their biggest play of the game, probably. So on this 3-play drive, Hudson I guess that's a 6 offensive lineman reports. Deshaun Watson passes short left for 1 yard, penalty for Jeff Conklin, offensive holding. So that backed the Browns up 20 yards, and then Nick Chubb rushed right for 9 yards. So then it's 2nd and 11. Deshaun Watson pass short left, and for Dave Bell, and it's intercepted by Daniel Sorensen because Evans, the safety, went out earlier in the game. Let's see. Yeah, Evans went out earlier in the game because he got hurt. And that was probably like the biggest play of the game. He ended up having a big return, just like Grant Delpit. He had like a 36-yard return, and he took it all the way down to the Browns' 15 yards. So he brought it back down. The Browns had brought it down to the Saints 30. They brought it down to all the way to the Browns' 15-yard, and the Saints ended up scoring 4 plays later on a heck of one of the toughest Alvin Kamara 4-yard runs you ever seen, just like the run previously by Taysom Hill. He bounced off a bunch of Cleveland Brown defenders and bounced into the end zone. And before you know it, the Saints have scored 17 unanswered points, and that's just that was just craziest thing I ever seen. That was probably the last thing I ever expected was for the Saints to score 17 unanswered points after going down 10 points in this game. Like that this team just showed grit in this game to be able to persevere, in these type of weather and going down by 10 points in this game. It would be very easy to say we're packing it in. We're not wanting to tackle hard anymore. We're not wanting to run hard anymore. We're not wanting to catch anymore, go over the middle, get tackled hard anymore. But man, they showed a lot of fight and stuff. Still continued to still, and so then Saints the Browns got it back and punted, and Saints then ended up having to punt it away. Saints got it back, and it's just kind of punt fest back and forth. Browns got it, and they ended up going on like that was like a 6-play drive that ended up turning it over on downs. But that was kind of a interesting play. That it was a 4th and 2, and they had ran the ball pretty well, and that was with 7 minutes left in the 4th quarter. And even though they were running the ball decent in that game, they decided to throw it 2 times in a row. Like it was 3rd and 2 from the Cleveland's 39, and they threw it incomplete. And then it's 4th and 2 from Cleveland's 39, and they throw it incomplete. It was just surprising that how much like Cleveland was deciding to like throw the ball in this game. And then Saints got it like one more time, before, and they just go 3-and-out. Saints were having, just like a lot of the Saints games, they're having a kind of a hard time closing this out, even though they've had multiple times, like they even after the Browns turn it over on downs and the Saints got it and at the Cleveland's 39-yard line, they couldn't move the ball any to add to their lead, because it's still just a 1 point, one score lead, one possession lead, and they couldn't add to the lead at all. And then Cleveland Browns get the ball back and they go on a long drive here. It was a 18 play drive, and Browns are driving, and they get all the way to the Saints 40 yard, all the way to their own 40-yard line, and it's the 3rd and 13, and Sean Watson passes to Donovan Peoples-Jones, and it's incomplete, and Paulson Debo gets called for a penalty for defensive holding, and it was just kind of a ticky-tack penalty. There was a couple similar holds like that against Tyrann Mathieu, and I think there's a similar one like that called against Paulson Debo last week as well. So against the Falcons too. So there's a trend for these phantom defensive holding calls against the Saints. So that's nothing new. There's been a trend of that recently, of these phantom ticky-tack holding calls. So that extends the drive, because if it wouldn't have been for that, it would have been a 4th and 13. But there's no guarantee the Saints would have kept them from converting a 4th and 13, even though it would have been hard. So the Cleveland Browns continue to go down the field, and they end up getting them all the way to a 4th and 10 at the Saints 15-yard line, and the Saints, Carl Granderson ends up sacking Deshaun Watson for a 7-yard loss, and that ends up ending the game there. So pretty exciting game, definitely one of the more enjoyable games this season. Kind of look at some of the Saints stats here. Andy Dalton. It was definitely nice to get a win on Christmas Eve. But anyways, look at some of these stats here. Andy Dalton only completed 8 of his 15 attempts for 92 yards. That's a 6.1 completion percentage, 1 interception, 23.7 QBR, a 44.3 rating, and I mean, he'd probably had 3 more completions if it wasn't for Keith Kirkwood having one bounce right off his hands. That would have been, I'm trying to think if that was on 3rd down. Both of those were on 3rd down. That was one right off of his hands, and then another one bounced off, like right off the back of his helmet, and then obviously the one by Juwan Johnson that was not an easy catch. Would have had been a diving catch that bounced off his hands for an interception. So that his completion percentage should be more like 11 for 15 and no interception. And the one that bounced off of Keith Kirkwood's helmet, if it would have been maybe a little bit better of a throw and out in front of Keith Kirkwood and he actually caught it, that could have maybe been a touchdown. So, I mean, woulda, coulda, shoulda, what it shoulda, hindsight maybe. I mean, Andy Dalton's numbers should probably be more like, I don't know, 11 for 15, 120 yards or something, and a touchdown is what his numbers should probably more look like. But anyways, that's just, you can't really project what they should actually look like. And then Alvin Kamara, once again, this was kind of like what I said last week. I didn't even really realize Alvin Kamara had this many yards. It's very quiet. He has it quietly two weeks in a row. He quietly had a pretty good game actually, compiling a lot more carries and a lot more touches than I even noticed. He had 20 carries for 76 yards, a 3.8 average, and a touchdown. 14 with a 14 long. Taysom Hill had 9 touches for 56 yards, 6.2 long, a touchdown, or 6.2 average, a touchdown, and 16 long. David Johnson had 7 carries for 16 yards, a 2.3 average, 0 touchdowns, and a long of 4. And then Adam Prentice, Pro Bowl alternate Adam Prentice, had 2 carries for 5 yards, a 2.5 average, no touchdowns, a long of 3. And then Rashid Shaheed coming up big, being the only your lead receiver on the day, with no Jarvis Landry, no Chris Olave on the day. Had four receptions for 41 yards, a 10.3 average, no touchdowns, for 16 yard long on 5 targets. Alvin Kamara had 2 receptions for 34 yards, a 17 for 17 average, no touchdowns. Had that one really nice 29-yard long that was like an over the middle, like a corner route, like over the middle, and then that was off of 4 targets. And then Juwan Johnson had 1 reception for 9 yards, and that was a 9 long off of 2 targets, and that was a big catch too that pretty much set them up for their touchdown as well. That was after the interception that they got. That was a big play as well, just off of his 1 catch. David Johnson had 1 catch for 8 yards and 8 average, 8 long, and then one target. And then we got Keith Kirkwood here with 0 receptions, 0 yards, 0 average, 0 touchdowns, 0 long, off of 2 targets. What the heck, bro? And then we got Andy Dalton with 2 fumbles. He fumbled 2 snaps. Oh, what the heck, man? Gotta be holding on to that thing. And then we got your leading tackler for today is Tyrann Mathieu, Pro Bowl alternate Tyrann Mathieu. Now that's what I was saying on the previous podcast, is that Tyrann Mathieu his play is kind of turned around a little bit. I think he's been playing a little bit better. He's maybe been settling in a little bit, but I kind of think he's been playing a little better in my opinion. But he had 11 total tackles, 6 solo, a tackle for loss. But I thought he was your leading tackle. I thought he played halfway decent in this game. And then let's see, Carl Granderson played really well in this game. He had 6 total tackles, 5 solo, sack, 3 tackles for loss. So that was impressive. Two quarterback hits. Let's see. David Onyemata had 4 total tackles, 2 solo, a half a sack. Let's see. Contavious Street had 3 total tackles, a half a sack. Let's see. Can't find anyone. Daniel Sorensen had 7 total tackles, 2 solo, pass deflection, and an interception. So yeah, uh, had some contributors uh, all over the defense there, and that was the game sealing sack by Carl Granderson. Rashid Shaheed on the kick returns. He had 2 returns for 47 yards at 23.5 average, and 1 long of 30 yards. Will Lutz was 1 for 1, that 23-yarder, 2 for 2 on extra points. And then Blake Gilligan was really good on the day. Like I said, for the most part, he's been pretty good. I think he had 1 shank in a couple of games back where he had like a 31-yarder, but for the most part, he's been really good here lately. He had six punts for 254 yards at 42.3 average, 1 touchback, 2 inside the 20, and a 52-yard long. So really good numbers there if you're just listing them off. I mean, maybe underwhelming numbers at the quarterback and wide receiver position, but that's really what you want. That's really what you wanted in this type of game, is to not throw the ball. Because when you look over here at the Cleveland Brown numbers and Deshaun Watson numbers, is the 15 for 31. That's how many times they passed it. And even though they threw it that many times, they only picked up 135 yards. And I mean, Andy Dalton had 92 yards passing. So it's not an incrementally more yards passing. And who won the game? Who won the game? The Saints did. And he was sacked 2 times, and they lost. And Andy Dalton was sacked no times, and they won, even with him fumbling 2 snaps. So I think we know why the Saints won, and that's because they didn't throw the ball as much. So on to next thing I want to talk about, and that's kind of the status of the NFC South. And this came kind of, I think this was before the Saints even finished out their game, and that was the Carolina Panthers. They just looked dominant against the Detroit Lions, and I don't think many people expected the Carolina Panthers to knock off the red hot Detroit Lions. The Lions were coming into that game really hot. I'm trying to think if the Lions may have had the longest winning streak maybe coming into that game. They maybe have won like 4 games in a row or something coming in the game, 4 or 5 games in a row. I'm not 100% sure. Might have to fact check me on that. But the Lions were one of the hottest teams in the league coming into that game, and a lot of people were projecting them to maybe win out and make the playoffs or be a wild card team. And man, the Lions came into that game and ran for like 300 yards, rushed for like 300 yards on them and blew them out. I'm trying to think what the final score. The final score of that game was like 37-24 or something like that. So now the NFC South is tied up in the middle there, 6-9, 6-9 for the Saints, and then before the Bucks played, and then the Buccaneers on Sunday night for the Sunday night game played the Arizona Cardinals, and with about 10 minutes left, the Cardinals go up 16 to 6 in that game, and it looked like for sure that the Cardinals were going to win that game, and should have known that was never going to be the case with how those games, with how the Cardinals, with how the Buccaneers have been beating people all year. Uh, I probably would have had more luck with the Cardinals winning that game if I would have turned it off right after James Conner ran that that ran that in ran that touchdown in with like 10.5 minutes left. Because I feel like I'm bad luck or something when I'm watching games like that when Tom Brady is playing a team. Like, if I'd have probably turned it off right after James Conner ran that in, it was like a 15-yard touchdown, 15, 16-yard touchdown. If I'd turned it off right then, maybe they'd have continued to hold on to the league. But I felt as if I was like bad luck that I continued to watch at that point. But yeah, of course, the Cardinals couldn't hold on to that 10-point lead. And man, one of maybe the stupidest play in that game is when the Cardinals, I'm trying to think if they were still up by a touchdown at that point, or maybe they were just up by 3 points at that point. And they were in real good position still to be like running the clock out, and they were down in Buccaneers territory to where they could maybe at least kick a field goal. Yeah, I think they were up by 3 points still, and there was only like 3 minutes or something left in the clock on the clock, and they're in position to pick up another first down to where they could still run out clock, and they only needed to pick up like 1 or 2 yards, and they do a pitch play off to the left and they fumble the ball, like giving it right back to the Buccaneers. And it's not that they did the pitch play, but it's the fact that they did it to a rookie when they had James Conner, who just like on 2 drives earlier scored a touchdown from not much farther out, maybe just like 15, 20 more yards out, scored like a 15-yard touchdown. And so it's just crazy. It's like these coaches do this stuff on purpose. It's like they purposely shoot themselves in the foot. Like, what are you doing on second, third and 2, 3rd and 1? Like, why are you doing a pitch play to a rookie running back when all you should do is be slamming it up in the middle, or doing a QB sneak or handing it off to a fullback? So of course Tom Brady gets the ball back and goes down and kicks a field goal. And of course, this is what makes it even worse. The Cardinals get the ball first and they go 3-and-out. And we already know Tom Brady goes down and kicks a field goal and wins the game. But what's wild about that is that if the Buccaneers would have lost this game and then played the Panthers next week and lost, the Buccaneers would have actually been eliminated from the playoffs. And if the Saints would have won against Philadelphia next week, it actually would be the Saints versus Panthers to decide who wins the NFC South Week 18. So it's just wild how the NFC South is building up and playing out. So the Saints are still in this. It may just be just barely, but they're still in this, and I'm still excited about it. I'm still having fun, and also to go on top of this, this is a little bit different, but this plays into the Saints having to play the Eagles. So the Minnesota Vikings are playing the New York Giants. And that game ended up coming down to a field goal. But if the Minnesota Vikings would have lost to the Giants, that would have secured the first round bye for the Eagles. So then maybe the Eagles would have like rested their starters and stuff and rested Jalen Hurts next week for us, but that didn't happen. The Minnesota Vikings ended up winning on a last-second 61-yard field goal. So there's more luck, bad luck for the Saints as well, New Orleans Saints as well. And then the Dallas Cowboys Philadelphia Eagles game comes down to the last second where Gardner Minshew had some late throws into the end zone, and they end up losing 40 to 34 in that game. So now Jalen Hurts, who has a sprained shoulder, is looking to try to play against the Saints in Week 17. So that's just the Saints' luck. They're needing to continue to try to win, and they can't catch the break of the Philadelphia Eagles trying to rest their starters and rest Jalen Hurts. So it's just that's the Saints. They can never have a team help them beat the Bucks and knock off the Buccaneers, and they can't have other teams help them out and even have a team win when they need it, and have other teams lose when they need it. So other team can take off and just win their division and secure a bye, so we don't have to worry about them playing as hard as they normally would. But that is life as a Saints fan, and I guess it is what it is at this point in the season. If the Saints would have took care of business better early in the season, we wouldn't have to be worrying about this. This really feels very similar to last year when the Saints were hoping and praying that this team would lose or this team would win that. I feel like this is probably going to come down to that. This will probably come down to the Saints hoping that the Falcons beat the Buccaneers in Week 18. Like the Saints will probably beat the Panthers, and then the Falcons will end up losing to the Bucks, and the Bucks will end up making the playoffs. That's probably what will end up happening. But at least we can say that the Saints almost made the playoffs. But hey, at least it'll still be fun until the very last seconds of the regular season. Okay, on to hot takes, and the first hot take was that I thought that Trevor Penning was gonna start at Cesar Ruiz right guard spot, but he didn't end up doing that. He ended up just being like eligible sixth offensive lineman a lot. I wish I would have picked up his snap numbers, his snap counts for how much he was in as the sixth offensive line. And I said like he was going to probably pancake a couple guys onto Alvin Kamara, rushing for 100 yards and picking up his fourth touchdown of the season since the Oakland Raiders game, since Alvin Kamara hadn't had like hardly any touchdowns since that game. And that didn't necessarily happen. But Trevor Penning didn't start at that position. But I would say I'm going to take credit for half of this. And the reason I'm going to take credit for half of this is because Alvin Kamara he did rush for close to 100 yards. He rushed. He had 20 carries for 76 yards rushing, and he also did get his fourth rushing touchdown. It wasn't his fourth rushing touchdown. I think it was his maybe his third rushing touchdown on the season, second or third rushing touchdown on the season. Maybe he has like one or two receiving touchdowns on the season as well. But it was his fourth touchdown on the season, and it was a rushing touchdown. And Trevor Penning was in a lot as an eligible blocker, and he did pancake a couple defensive players at that position, and definitely on that quarterback sneak and sweep by Taysom Hill. He was active at his position. So I think I'm going to take half credit for that. Uh, so I think I'll take half credit for that. And then on the on the other prediction, I predicted that Kareem Hunt would actually rush for more yards than Nick Chubb, and I thought it would maybe be inflated by him maybe ripping off a big 50-yard run or something like that, and that maybe Nick Chubb would maybe have more carries, but Kareem Hunt's like average would be like inflated or something. That would be what led to it. But that didn't happen. Nick Chubb still ended up being Cleveland's leading rusher, and Nick Chubb had 24 carries for 92 yards and a 3.8 average, no touchdowns with a 19 long. And Kareem Hunt ended up having only 7 carries for 8 yards, a 1.1 average for what was a 4-yard block. So Kareem Hunt, he got some touches. He got 7 touches, but just didn't do anything with them. So the Saints defense did a good job of containing Kareem Hunt when he did get some touches. David Johnson actually did more with his 7 touches. He got 16 yards on his 7 touches. So that's kind of a little bit embarrassing if you're Kareem Hunt. And then with my score prediction, I predicted the Saints to win this game. So I'll take credit for that. I think there was a lot of people leading up to this game that didn't think the Saints could win this game, and I predicted this game to be some craziness to happen in this game. I predicted maybe some missed field goals, maybe a safety, more field goals. I didn't expect there to be 3 touchdowns scored in this game. I definitely didn't expect the Saints to score 17 points in this game. I predicted the final score to be like 12-9. So I came close to predicting how many points Cleveland scored. I predicted the Saints to win this 12-9. And after this win, the Saints winning this 17-10, it was nice to also see Dennis Allen show some emotion on the sidelines, seeing Malcolm Roach pick him up and bear hug him twice, not one time, but 2 times after Carl Granderson got the game-sealing sack. You know, that was probably the most emotion and energy that I've seen out of Dennis Allen since that they beat the Oakland or the Las Vegas Raiders, and that was probably the only reason he had any motion in that game is just because that was his ex team, you know. So that was also nice, and maybe I don't know if we could build off of that or if any fans really want to see them build off of that, but I think they've won too many games now, and kind of hard to say it, but I think he's in some of these games, like the Oakland game and this game and sweeping the Falcons. I think he's done enough to get a second year, and I know there's probably a lot of people that don't like that, but I think at least for probably half a season or until he shows some more bad stuff, you're probably going to see some more Dennis Allen for at least another season. But hey, if he can improve a little bit more, and the NFC South is as bad as it was this year, maybe he can make the playoffs, and it's just funny and ridiculous that this is the first time in his career that he's ever won 2 games in a row, and this is the best record that he's ever had in his career. But man, it feels good to felt really good to win this game and this type of game, and it felt good to stay alive in this NFC South playoff hunt. And I hope this made everyone's Christmas Eve good, and I hope it was a nice early Christmas gift and holiday gift, and maybe even New Year's gift. Even though I think the Saints play on maybe New Year's Eve. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So who dat? Can I get a check, please?